The Icons of Real Estate podcast. Are you ready to learn the proven money-making secrets from top-producing icon agents? Ready to skyrocket your business? This podcast is for you. Tune in every week and find out how to implement proven strategies to 10 times your business. From $3 million to $30 million in just 12 months. Brought to you by the Masters of Real Estate Marketing, REALTOR SEO.
Welcome to the Icons of Real Estate. I'm Tim Calloway. We have a very special guest for you today from Toronto, Canada with eXp Realty, Chip Barkel. Chip, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. You know, it's Friday in Florida, so that means anything can happen this weekend. So outside of my home. So glad to have you on the show and interested in kind of hear how things are going. Obviously it's pretty chilly up there right now. Everybody's getting a blast. So hope you stay warm and cozy this weekend.
Yeah, it's just started actually. It was up until about 10 days ago. I have a new convertible and I was driving with the top down and it's like, wow. Oh, this is great. It's November. And then suddenly it was over, so we now have snow on the ground.
You're like, time to park it in the garage.
That's right, exactly.
Move on till next March. Well, yes. I saw that, Buffalo, which, really got 5 feet. Buffalo.
I didn't see the headline. I saw it was coming, but I heard through talking to a friend of mine that they got pummeled and they're expecting more. They're on the bad side of the lake, so they often get it.
Yeah, everything off the lake. I mean, I used to live off Lake Michigan, and they used to always say, always cooler near the lake, and I'm like, cooler? It's like icebergs. Are you kidding me? I see polar bears coming across. So, hey, Chip, why don't you share with us? Let's just start at the beginning. How did you get into being a realtor? Were you a kid at 6 years old going, I can't wait to sell homes? Or
no, actually, I was a teacher, and when I graduated with my teaching degree and psychology degree, there were really no teaching jobs around, and so I thought, well, I'll find something eventually. And then someone said, if you learned programming, you would be a good programmer. And I thought, well, I could always teach that, whatever that is. So I became a programmer, and a few years later taught in business. I taught programmers and traveled around the world doing that for many years. But real estate was always the road not taken. And, it's kind of hard to leave a salaried position for something that has no salary at all, So, right. I always think Brian Buffini says it nicely that in real estate, there's no ceiling, but there's no floor also, So, and that's very true. So it was a road not taken. And then several years ago, I thought, well, if I don't do it now, when will I ever do it? And so I decided to make the leap, and I have not looked back. So
yeah, fantastic. I like that story. See, I love hearing about those that came from somewhere else, literally, career-wise. That's a polar leap to the right or left, I mean, that's great.
Well, there is and there isn't. There's a lot of teaching in real estate, a lot of explaining and holding hands and helping people along. So there's some more parallels than, apparently, according to statistics, there's quite a few ex-teachers that are real estate agents. It's like probably one of the top professions. So
yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. I've had 3 former teachers probably in the past 2 weeks. I didn't really put that together as you were saying that. But yeah, there are quite that, and that does make sense because you're counseling, right? You're teaching, you're counseling, so on and so forth. So tell me how in Toronto, I mean, everybody does it differently, boots on the ground, social media, digital marketing, SEO, you name it. How do you market to your clients? Are you primarily in the city? And then, how are you finding people?
Well, when I first started, I just tried everything and thought, okay, what works, what, expecting people would call, especially, my sphere, that's the kind of one of those myths that, you have to have a good sphere, to do this. Well, often the sphere doesn't use you, because I personally think that's because they see you in your former role. They don't really see you in your new role. And so they know, well, I want a real realtor. I want somebody with experience. So how I got started really was through relationships. My first client called me. I didn't call her.
Oh, wow.
We had some landscaping done, and there was going to be a package that came with the landscaper. And we went to Home Show and met this woman, and I said, well, that's all she does is landscape lighting. Why don't we get a quote from her? And I was so impressed with her that we went with her. And about 6 months later, she called and wanted to pick my brain about real estate. Well, I was not a realtor, and I gave her my opinion. I gave her a contact at my former agent. And then a few months after that, I called her and I said, have you ever talked to that agent about your idea? And she said, no, I didn't want to leave a message. I said, well, I've decided to go to real estate school and, become a realtor, and I'm probably going to join that brokerage. And she said, well, connect with me, give me a call when you land. And she took me out for lunch to celebrate my new career.
Nice.
During the lunch, she said, I'm not in my forever home. And this was about 65 years old. I've moved around a lot and, blah, blah, blah. Well, of course, in my novice understanding is like, it was a someday conversation. Well, a week later, she emailed me, didn't even call, said, I'd like you to list my house. I was like, well, sure. So
Nice.
yeah,
This is
I
an
always
easy
tell,
career, man.
that's
I should have
right.
done this a long time ago. Yeah.
Exactly. I tell new agents, clients aren't going to call you. And I thought, well, actually, mine did. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of got me started. But, I realized she called me because I had taken the time to build a relationship with her.
Right.
And that was the real reason. And then after that, it really became about relationships. So I learned that early on.
Yeah, it's 100% a relationship business. Mm-hmm. The houses are there no matter what, mm-hmm. right? And they can buy them from anybody they want.
That's right.
List them with whoever they want. They're buying and selling you. Well, not selling you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're buying you.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not the brokerage either. I thought, of course, if I choose a really good brokerage, I never got any business out of that particular brokerage that I can point to. So it's about you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have a hard time believing, Chip, that 65-year-old ladies are calling you today, having you list homes on a regular basis without you making any contact. How are you finding them today?
Well, it's a series of things. I use send out cards in my business. I don't door knock and I don't cold call. Okay. Very early on, I was told, well, you have to, door knock. And I tried it on my street for like 2 days and I decided, it's not for, first of all, it's not the agent I want to be, number one. Didn't feel comfortable. I remember I knocked on the door of this one woman, and when she realized that I was an agent, she came out from the porch and she looked me in the eye and said, I don't like real estate agents much. And I was like, oh, okay. What do you say to that? Then she went on to tell me the story about this lady agent knocked on her door, and I told her Gladys down the street is, old and sick, and she probably has to sell. And that lady agent sold her house and didn't even have the courtesy to come back and say thank you. And I said, you're absolutely right. That's wrong. That's terrible, and I'm not like that. And anyway, I went home. Next day, I came back I went to Godiva Chocolate and I bought her a box of chocolates. And I said, this is your thank you. And she, you didn't have to do that. I said, no, but I just want to show you that not all real estate agents are the same. And, you deserve to thank you. This is your thank you. Well, after that, of course, I gave her my newsletter, and I do pop-bys from time to time with small gifts. And at one point, her husband said, we're never going to sell. They're going to take me out of here in a box. But we like getting your newsletter. We enjoy reading it. And I thought, oh, that's fine, no problem. Well, a few years later, let me see, it was probably 7 years after the initial contact. I got a call from a man, and of course it was a out of province number. And anyway, I answered it. He said, my mother needs to sell her house. And when I realized who the mother was, I figured out from the conversation his father had died. And my mother's going to move out of province with me, and we're going to interview 4 or 5 agents, and but we'd like you to come and talk to us. He said, but my mother does like you. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's fine. I like her too, So I went to talk to them, and about, 20 minutes into the conversation with the mother and the son, he stopped and he said, I think I can speak for my mother. We don't need to interview any other agents. We would like you to sell our house. And so I said, well, that's quite an honor. And they actually left to move out west before the house was it was barely listed. And she gave me the keys and said, I know my house is in good hands. It's up to you now. It's in your ballpark. So that was quite a nice ending to that story, so
Ah,
but again, I built the relationship. I let her know I'm a neighbor and I'm there to help, and that's the commonality.
yeah, that's fantastic. I'm beginning to think that you may have great favor with some of the senior community there, Chip.
Well, I do hold an SRES designation for seniors.
Ah,
I've always had
I
an
knew it.
affinity for older people. I remember as a little kid, I wasn't allowed to cross any streets yet, so it was before kindergarten. I wandered around the block to the next street, and there was a man who was doing gardening. And my father had stopped to try to chat with him a few times, so I knew he wasn't a stranger. And we were in a small town anyway, but we became good friends. I didn't realize this at the time because I was little. His wife had just died. He was kind of lonely, and he liked having me around and making me, malted milkshakes and things and hot
Yeah.
chocolate in the winter. So, I've always had kind of an affinity. I have quite a few friends now that are in their 90s and late
Oh,
80s, and it's just kind of a natural progression of who I am, and they need help.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and they do need a lot of help. And I want to say this without being crass, I guess, but they're preyed upon a lot.
They are absolutely, absolutely.
So,
I have a few experiences there too. Sometimes from their own family, which is really horrible.
yeah, yeah.
But having said all that, I still am open to business from young people. I have clients that are 24, 25 years old too. So,
Yeah.
I do look to the niche of the 50, 60 plus as well.
Right. Hey, that includes me as well. I'm in my 50s. Um, so we talked about kind of how you got started, a little bit how you market. You use the send card. Sending out the cards still works really well. I mean, you get a good feedback on those, or
It works very well. Like I said, I'm not a door knocker, and in some cases, like a condo, you can't door knock anyway.
right.
I used to own a condo. It was an investment. Kind of the idea, maybe it would be for retirement. And I send a card every year, November, this time of year, showing them what has sold in the building in the last 2 years, because sometimes there's only a few sales. It's about 120 units. And I remember one year I got a call, Chip, it's George. I'm thinking, okay, it's George. Should I know
Hey,
who George is?
George.
And yeah, he said, I'm on the 14th floor. And I was like, oh, it's from the condo. So he thought because I said I owned in the building that I lived there, So anyway, I went and saw him and listed and sold his condo, and it all came from that card, So again, that's the
Wow.
beginning. I treat it as lead
Yeah.
gen. That's the
Yeah.
beginning. It's still up to me to see
Yeah.
them through. So
You ever do anything on the digital side ever, or I
I
mean,
do a little bit. Obviously, I do social media. I can't point to a whole lot of business that has come from that. I've started
yeah.
doing videos. I wrote a book. I have one handy. It's a series of books called The Elephant in the Room: 7 questions that all sellers, buyers, or 60 plus need to ask their realtor but don't. So these are those little
Wow.
niggling questions that, am I ready to sell? Can I trust this guy? Things that they wouldn't necessarily come out and say. So I treat those books. I originally did it as a funnel, PDF
Yeah.
online kind of
Yeah.
thing. But I found I got more traction. I printed some out, and so
Yeah.
they become part of my free listing package. So it's kind of like before you pick a realtor, these are some questions you might want to
Ah, that's
ask.
good.
So it's helpful. It's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's great. I
Yeah.
really think that's a great pre-listing idea. So we talked about how you got started, now kind of how you market to folks, and let's put our prognostication hats on, and let's talk about the future. I mean,
hmm
what's the next 1-3 years look like for Chip, and what are some of his goals for his business?
Well, obviously, we all want to grow. I icon this year, so that was my goal for
Nice.
this year, and it was like great.
Congratulations.
I've got
Yeah.
there, and but we all want to grow. It's year to year can be quite different. I had some veteran realtors saying I had a really bad year last year. I was like, well, it was pretty good for me. So, but that doesn't mean it's going to be across the board. I think we're going to have to work a little bit harder, let people know we're there. But having said that, people will always need to sell. They're going to
Right.
age out of wherever they are. divorces, marriages, babies, things happen, like the whole lifestyle. And I found that in COVID, things kind of shut down because I deal with a lot of seniors. If you're a senior and you didn't need to sell in 2020 or 2021, you weren't going anywhere,
Right.
because who wants to go into a retirement home when, COVID was
Yeah.
scaring us. But having said that, there was pent up demand at the end of
Yeah.
2020, 2021. The phone started ringing again. So,
Right.
the need will still be there.
Yeah. I think, what I say is we're just back to normalcy now. I mean, it was a crazy 2 year ride. Gosh, I hope we never go through it again. I don't mean go through it on the real estate side. I'm talking about the COVID side.
Yes,
You
that
know,
too.
it's just I can't think of at my age at 52, thinking back to when I was a child, not to get overly reminiscent, but ever thinking that we would have been in a situation like that. And now
Well,
I'm in Florida, so my situation was far different than yours. I was literally at Walt Disney World while people were locked in their homes in
mhm,
other cities. So, I can't. Sometimes I can't relate, to what people went through.
mhm,
But I know even the small amount that I went through, I didn't like. I'll just put it,
mhm,
you know.
No, it's very true.
Yeah.
And I realized too, fortunately, real estate in Ontario was considered an essential service. And I
Hmm.
did have somebody come to me at the end of 2020, and she had some pre-existing health issues. And there was a reason that they wanted to sell. There's going to be some construction in the neighborhood, and they said, I think we should sell sooner rather than later.
Hmm.
And so I helped them, and I said, look, in terms of listing your house, I have a kind of virtual, home selling program. And really, a lot of those things were things I had already anyway. I always
Right.
do professional photos, I always do a video, I always do floor plans. So when I looked at that, it's like, this is my virtual um, marketing plan, if you will. So by the time they want to come and see the house, they've really looked at it 3 times a Sunday, and it's like a second or a third showing. It's like, okay, you can look at a floor plan, look at pictures, but does it really look that good? Let's go and
Right.
see. And we sold
Is
their
it
house
gonna?
in a week.
Wow.
So the people that were visiting showings, they were serious. I stopped doing open houses at that point because I realized they don't really work anyway in terms of, let's face it, realtors do open houses to get leads. But in my price point, all the leads people walk through the door, they'll have an agent.
Yeah.
You're not going to get business. So, it's like if they're serious, they can book an appointment. And if
Right.
their agent can't make it, I'm happy to show the house. So I had an
Right.
agent saying, "Oh, that house, you're going to go into multiples for sure. I'm busy today, and I can't really take my clients." And I said, "Well, if you want to send your clients, I'm happy to show the house. I know that's not a very popular." Attitude with agents, but I take the assumption that I was hired to sell the house,
Yeah.
not I wasn't hired to collect other new clients. And she said, no, no, it's you're going to sell this tonight. Well, we actually didn't have any offers that first day, and so I was like, okay. But then a couple of days later, full price offer came in, so it was
Wow.
fine. It was also early December, so
Oh
it's
yeah.
like you know who knows. And then of course, clients get concerned. Wow, we said that we were going to take offers on Tuesday, and there were no offers. I was like, you know what? It happened to me when I sold my own home several years ago. A couple of
Yeah.
days later, full price offer, and that's exactly what happened. So
Yeah. So
just have to be patient.
right. So I don't normally talk about the weather on my podcast, but I'm going to talk about the weather right now. And the reason is because, I'm in Florida, South,
Yeah,
like I'm
yeah.
literally I could walk to the Bahamas across the water. Um, so how much does weather affect seasonality of your business? I've lived in Wisconsin, places like that, and I know
Mhm.
I've sat for months doing nothing at some
Yeah.
point. Is that kind of what happens, Chip? I mean, do you take the vacation time to hunker down and hibernate for a few months, or is it pretty robust, during the winter months?
Usually it's seasonal. Having said that, I sold my own home last, well, it was March, but we had bought in November.
Yeah.
So it was January. My goal was to get it listed by March 1st, and we were still in the throes of winter. And if you had
Yeah.
told me a couple of years ago you're going to sell your house in the winter, you're crazy. But
Right.
things happen. It's we happened to find a place, and okay, this is when we have to close. We closed in January, and there you go. But generally speaking, again, a big part of my business is the older crowd. If they don't have to sell in the winter, they don't, they
Yeah.
don't have to, they're not going to do that. There's always the exception here and there, but it's kind of nice to be able to take this couple of months off. And then I always tell people, depending on the weather, how much snow we have on the ground, it could be February 1st, February 15th, March 1st, things pick up again. The phone starts ringing and, people are getting that itch.
Yeah.
So, it's good to have that rest cycle. You need
Sure.
that rest. So,
For sure. You got to go out in your shed over the lake and do some ice fishing, right?
that's right. Exactly.
Well, Chip, we're kind of winding down here. So how would someone get in touch with you if they wanted to maybe look in the Toronto area or list their home? Maybe they're there right now. How would they get in touch with you?
Well, I'm all over the internet. Chip Barkel. My website is chipbarkel.com. And my email, chip@chipbarkel.com. But I'm easy to find on the internet, on social media, Google. I'm there. Yeah, happy to help. Again, whether you're a first-time buyer or a last-time seller, it doesn't really matter. I'm here to help everyone.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. And I always do this, Chip. All of my guests, I always say, I'm just a DJ and you're the hit record, and I'm playing the hits. But why don't you take us out? Whatever's on your heart, your mind, your soul, that you want to share with everybody. And it doesn't have to be about real estate. Most people it is. It could be about your pets, your family, but take us out and tell us kind of how you're thinking and feeling right now.
Well, thank you. I think mindset is really important. There are a couple of things that come to mind. I do pop buys. I make jam in the summer, and that I do
Nice.
my own jam. I make mincemeat at Christmas. I make 60
Very cool.
quarts or 60 liters of mincemeat every year. And a couple of years ago, a friend said, that's a lot of work and it's kind of expensive. And, is it really worth it? And I thought, well, I gave 50 of them away last year. Some of them I kept for friends. And out of those 50 turned into 10 transactions. And,
Oh,
that's 20%. That's a pretty high percentage.
that's
And
great.
somebody, I was telling a coach about this, and he said, well, what does it cost you? And most people spend $2 or $3 on a pop-by gift. I said, well, kind of expensive. It's $12 to $15 a pop. And he
Yeah.
said, I would gladly give you $15 for a $2 million listing lead. I was like, oh, okay. I
Right.
never thought of it that way, So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's mindset's important. And, by the same token, a year ago, October, we bid on a house and we lost it by $9,000.
Oh,
And I think we've all been there. And I said, well, you know what? I have an inventory creation system because, my partner was saying, well, very little inventory on the market. This was the only house like that in that model that was sold the whole year. And I said, well, I have an inventory creation system. What do you mean? He said, well, you send out cards. And I sent 40 cards to the neighborhood saying, I have a client. He missed out on a property. This is what he's looking for. Call me or email. I said, it might not work, but it could work. Well, I got an email and said, sure, come and look. Went and looked. And not only did we get the house for $100,000 cheaper, I made $50,000 in the deal. And it was the easiest transaction of my life. They were nice people and they were decision makers. I went in with the offer and my check,
right.
kind of expecting that we'd negotiate a bit. And he looked up and he said, well, I'll give you an answer by noon tomorrow. I said, okay. So I left and I looked at the clock. I was like, I wasn't even in there 10 minutes. It's like, dear,
Wow.
that's not good, right? So quarter 12 the next day, I got a phone call. We have a deal. And I was like, oh, great. And so, like if I hadn't sent those 40 cards, that would not have happened. And
Right.
since that was for ourselves, that was in my own home, it literally changed my life. I have a new lifestyle. So,
Yeah.
don't take the attitude, oh, no, that's going to work, or that's a lot of work. I don't know whether I can do that. Do it. There's no guarantees in life. And so that's how I go. And just, act, act as part of action, get
Yeah.
moving.
Right.
And people, I always remind people, people in action is 3 words, not 2. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, and I have a whole new neighborhood and a whole new community, and you know, it's worked
Yeah.
out great.
That's awesome, Chip. Well, hey, Chip, it's been a joy having you on the program. I look forward to catching up again, maybe over the next 3, 6, 9 months. I'll let you thaw out before we talk again. Chip Barkel, everyone from Toronto, Canada, with eXp Realty. Chip, thank you so much for being on the show. Look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.